Hey guys, welcome back to our CLC podcast where we get to sit down, jump into the scripture we're going to be talking about for that week. And this week, we're continuing on and Beyond the Tomb, which is awesome. Love the series, love the idea of it. I love everything about it and some of these stories that we get to see and the threads that Jesus is working on before he leaves again. And he last week we talked about his appearance. We talked about Thomas, the disciples, kind of what was happening. And this week we're going to continue on in John 21, and we're looking at when he appears to them again, and specifically kind of deals with Peter.
Yeah, but this is a killer story.
Yeah.
This is the famous Peter's fishing naked story. This is one we taught multiple times. Never in this way. So the beyond the tomb, Jesus being resurrected, spending time. What is he trying to solve? So the focus is what's going on with the disciples in these moments that Jesus is dealing with, and how does that relate to our life? And maybe we find ourselves walking through some similar things.
And we have the advantage of knowing what happens. You kind of put yourself in the story. I mean, what becomes Acts and the birth of the early church, we know now. We know how it unfolds. Thinking about this and what they would have been going through and thinking and trying to figure out, and it's just a whole different thing.
So we're still in that 40-day period. Jesus is accomplishing a lot, and he's preparing them because he's heading on to the Father, and we are the plan, right? Like the church is going to carry the message imperfectly, by the way, not as good as Jesus did.
Yeah.
But Jesus has 40 days to get the disciples dialed in. That's why I think these things are important, dealing with doubting Thomas that we just talked about, getting the disciples rallied back together. Kat next week is going to talk about the women at the tomb. So he's not leaving anybody out. He's trying to get everybody connected, ready for what's going to be next in the next season. So the focus now then turns to the disciples, but really clearly hones in on Peter.
Yeah.
And you can't understand this story unless you read the lead up to Jesus on the cross, and even before that. So this story that we're going to put a bow on today with Peter, and this could have fit in our Around the Table series because it's a meal.
Yeah.
Really starts with Peter recognizing that Jesus is the Messiah. So go all the way back, and Jesus is the Messiah, and he understands who Jesus is. Then you fast forward to the Last Supper when Jesus says someone's going to betray me, and Peter says, no, never me, and he says, oh well, by the time sun comes up 3 times, dude, you're going to do it 3 times. Then he does, right? So the guy who was willing to die doesn't even admit to him,
and he realizes it. We see that in the scripture. That third time, he hears the rooster and it hits him.
Yeah.
He realizes, oh man, I did blow it.
Despair, broken, hurting. But if you don't have this story, and I'll tell you, in antiquity, John's the last gospel written, so for a long time, they only had the first gospels. They didn't have this piece of the story. So how does Peter go from utter failure to the Peter that we read about in Acts 3 that preaches the greatest sermon ever, and 3,000 people come to the church? Something has to happen in between, and it's this story. So when John gives us this piece of insight that no one else did, then maybe you can go, oh, there's an extra bit there.
That's what happened, yeah.
These verses are full of word plays in the Greek between phileo, agape love, and phileo love, feeding my sheep, caring for my sheep. All of the stuff that happens here would be lost in the English language, so you got to dive into it and really look at it. But where do you want to start? What do you want to talk about?
So they kind of go back to what they knew. We go back to the fishing, and Peter says, verse 3, I'm going fishing.
I'm going fishing. So he didn't lose his place with the disciples, even though he royally blew it. And we don't know if this is day 4 in the 40 days or if this is day 35. So somewhere in that time frame, Peter, they're back by the Sea of Tiberias, which is the Sea of Galilee. So they've gone back to their home region, and Peter's like, I'm going fishing.
Yeah,
a lot of preachers view this as negative. He's going back to his old way of life. They might have needed some money,
Sure.
right? 40 days. The elect Jesus president fundraiser would have dried up at that point, right?
Yeah.
So all the funds that were coming in to help support the ministry may not be there anymore. And Judas, he's no longer with him, so all that money's probably gone.
Yep.
That probably disappeared. So it could be any number of reasons why he decides to go fishing. Could be just angst.
Yeah.
Or maybe he needed something to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fishing's where I think. You put me in a river, not with a bunch of dudes in a boat, like that's going to be a challenge. But you put me in a river in Colorado somewhere or here, wherever, I can process, I can think. So maybe that's what Peter's doing.
Sure.
I'm going fishing.
Yeah.
It's where I think best.
Makes sense.
Yep.
So Jesus appears.
Yeah, but it's awesome because they go fishing and they don't catch a thing. That's a shocker. For people whose profession is fishing, not great.
It happens to them a lot.
Happens to them a lot.
Yeah. So
Jesus appears, and they go fishing at night. I'll have a lot for the sermon about that. I think that's so interesting that they did a lot of fishing at night. Why would that be important? Probably market. You want to bring fish to the market the next day fresh. They didn't have a way to really keep it fresh, so you'd fish at night, you'd bring it in the morning. Sun comes up, they had nothing, but there's Jesus on the shore. Mm-hmm. And the way that would have laid out, because we've stood in that spot that's 100% maybe where he was, where the sun would have been rising and where Jesus would have been standing, the sun would have been his back. So there's no way they could have recognized him, and they're way offshore. So they don't know who it is, but they're close enough to have a conversation. And he says, I don't think he says you catching anything. Here, we're back to those questions. What was the question?
Yeah, fellows, have you caught any fish?
Yeah. What you catching?
Mm-hmm.
See, so remember this. We need to do a sermon series called Questions of the Bible. Yeah. That's ought to be one that we definitely do. And what you catching? You catching anything? And, they don't get it right there. But that's a direct question they asked him. No. And so what does he say? He says, throw the net on the other side of the boat. Those boats were about 7 to 8 feet wide. I mean, you're just like, whatever, dude. Like, who's this guy telling us how to fish? We fish for a living.
Yeah.
And they do. And they catch a bunch of fish. And who is it that figures it out? John.
Of course.
John. It's Jesus. It's the Lord.
Or the disciple Jesus loved.
The disciple Jesus loved.
Yeah,
that's because he tells you.
Yeah.
Says to Peter, it's the Lord. So Simon decides it's time to put his clothes on because John tells us that he's naked.
Yeah.
He jumps in the water and starts to swim to land, which is 100 yards off, about 100 yards off, it says. If you read, a hilarious part of this is if you read it, the disciples get to the shore about the same time he does because he put all his clothes on. He's swimming. He would have been better swimming naked.
Yeah.
He gets to the shore. They get there, but he's got to turn around and go help them bring all these fish in. A lot of commentary about the fish. I have no idea if any of that's real about number of fish equals the number of people, different, nationalities of people who maybe they counted the fish because they were fishermen and that's what they typically did. If somebody asks me what I'm caught, I know how many I've caught, right? That's a fishing thing. And they were, all you guys out there.
They were that big.
And they were,
they keep getting bigger.
That's right. They keep getting bigger as they got in. But then he has dinner with them.
It's the meal. We're back to the meal.
Yeah, or breakfast. Yeah, back to a meal, back around the table. Jesus had a charcoal fire on the shore. He's cooking fish and bread. You can't make that up. He asked them to add some of their fish to it. There's all sorts of symbolism there. The charcoal fire is a direct connection to John. He mentions it 2 times. One is when Peter betrays Jesus. It's not just at a fire; it's at a charcoal fire. So the smells, the experience. There are places that you go. I don't know if you've experienced this, where you walk in and you smell something and it brings you back to a place. Movie theaters for me all have the same rotten smell, but I don't know what that is, man.
It's the popcorn.
Maybe edit that out. It's not the popcorn. It's whatever their carpets smell like after thousands of people have walked through there. Sorry that you had to endure that, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. So as he sits around that fire, he would have been reconnected to maybe the worst moment of his life.
Wow. That's big.
And then Jesus has a conversation with him.
Yeah. So I love the human element of this, and we're kind of joking about it, the scene, setting the scene. He's jumping in, he's naked, he's putting his clothes on, he's got to go help the fit. Like there's such a this could be any of us.
real.
I mean, there's such a human element to this that I think sometimes with faith, and it's the Lord, it's God, there's a reverence, of course, but Jesus was also human, like fully human, and we can lose some of that sometimes to just think about how they would have interacted, how they would have joked around. I think we talked about that at the Easter series around the table, because that's when you're at your most relaxed, your guards are down, you are just who you are, and that's what we see.
Yeah. He was fully human, and now we see him resurrected as God. And the power of smell, the power of connection, the specificity, right? Like of that fire in that place. Tabga, I think, is the name of what they call it now, modern day. When you sit there, it's beautiful, man. And you can hear Tiberias just down the Sea of Galilee. I mean, there's a lot that goes on in that spot. It would have been a reconnection, would have been very close, 100% maybe, to where the Sermon on the Mount was preached. There's many Sermons on the Mount, but where the Sermon on the Mount was. So he's reconnecting them back to this moment. And people call this moment the restoration of Simon. And not to give the whole thing away, we've taught this before, but there's a new element in there that I'd not seen before. It's a continuation of it. There's the wordplay is on the word love. Our language is woefully short to understand that.
Yep.
In the Greek, you have agape, which is the God 100% type of love.
Perfect love.
Perfect love. And then you have phileo, which is brotherly love. So if you just, let's say if you could associate a percentage with it, Jesus asked Peter, do you love me? The perfect love, 100%. And his response, honestly, back to Jesus is, I phileo love you, 70%. And Jesus asks him again, do you phileo love me? I mean, do you agape love me? Do you 100% love me? And he responds back, I phileo love you.
What do you think's changed in Peter in this time? Because this was Peter all in, I'm going to die for you.
Yeah.
And now
now it's authentic Peter. Peter knows that he knows. So Peter's not saying, I completely love you. He's actually saying, I don't know that I love you. Like I thought I did, and here I am wrecked. So the third time Jesus asks him, and we all say he asked him a third time, and so this broke his heart. In the Jewish culture, things were always done in multiples, and so this third time would have been normal to him. But Jesus changes the word. Jesus actually says, do you even phileo love me? To which Peter had to then his heart was crushed because he's like, I don't even know if I phileo. But he says, I phileo love you. Like I'm at least 70% in. And then Jesus restores him because he gives him the command of what to do. And then you get on to the rest of the message and he lets him know how he's going to die. So he basically says, not only in your life will you love me, you're going to have the opportunity to give your life for me. So there's the foreshadowing of what's going to take place. So
that's so cool.
You can't make it up.
No. And it's Jesus he just took what Peter had.
Yeah.
And Peter finally was that, Lord, this is all I got.
Yeah.
And I'm giving it to you. And that was enough. Jesus, that's enough. I'm going to do the rest.
Yeah. I think of, we work with so many folks at Celebrate Recovery and in recovery ministry that have hit rock bottom. And when you've hit rock bottom, you recognize that this is, what am I? Everybody already has seen everything I have now. It's as ugly as it can possibly be.
Yeah.
So like the only thing I have going forward maybe is honesty and authenticity. And so this is that moment where Peter, who's pretty brash, sometimes probably leads with unction before he even knows he can do it because it's open mouth, insert foot. He is brutally honest. Mm-hmm. It's a great place for all of us to be, to recognize what God has called us to, because it was never about Peter accomplishing. It was about God through Peter accomplishing. And maybe that's the instance in what you see. So if you were to ask me, Scott, what does Jesus accomplish in this appearance? Has to be, I'm still writing the message, but it has to be this taking our bravado, our thought on how awesome we are.
Yeah.
And then reminding us, number one, that we aren't. And number two, that we can be if we understand our place and who is awesome. And then allowing God to restore, to bring back, and to position us. Because after this, Peter doesn't become perfect, but he's all in. He is all in.
Yeah.
And he starts to go. Now, we do know later on in Acts, he messes up a little bit. He and Paul have a come to Jesus moment. That's a great phrase there.
It actually fits.
Yeah, it actually fits
literally
for the first time ever. And he so it's not to say that he's perfect here, but he's gets himself back online. And it's a great Sunday, a great day to consider this for our own lives.
Yeah. And you see that choice too at 19, and Jesus said this to let him know what was going to happen. And he said, "Follow me." So you see that too, that Peter gets to, he has the choice. I mean, he could have walked away, especially in what had happened and with the foreshadowing of what was going to happen. I mean, if that's going to make anybody walk away, that might do it.
Yeah.
And he doesn't. We know he doesn't.
Yeah. And man, the phrase "follow me" is so important because all of these are reconnections, right? Back. He's bringing the whole story back online. But follow me means you're not alone. You're not leading me. You're following me. Puts everything in a proper perspective.
So good.
Yeah. What else do you have? What's your thoughts on this? I've been talking a lot. Anything? What's your Peter moment?
My Peter moment.
Jeff, what do you open share mic?
Yeah.
No. Or what do you see in there that maybe jumps off the page to you?
I just see Peter. I see the humility of Peter. I see that, like you said, the bravado's gone. I mean, the veil has been lifted. Jesus has seen him, I guess, at his worst moment. Probably at several of them as he's following. He had kind of moment after moment. But Peter was always the guy that I think a lot of us can relate to, where it has to say something if there's a silence, or has to be the one to be first and try it. You see him fail, but you see him step out and really live boldly, which I think is important.
Yeah. So what I love about this is we're ending the text at 19, but I encourage you to read on, because this is like this, oh, Peter's back. And within a few verses, he's walking down the beach with Jesus and John, and Peter looks at John and says, "What about him?" As if, well, I just went through all that. Why don't you deal with him? And Jesus says, "Don't you worry about him. I'll take care of him. If he's going to live forever, then he can live forever." And so Peter turns right back into an idiot.
He's still Peter.
He's still Peter. He's still Peter. That's a good point. And we're still Scott.
Yeah.
And you just got a couple of edges knocked off, and we'll deal with that later. But Jesus, can you imagine Jesus probably went, "Oh, dude, just let that moment sit." But the funny thing is that John lets you know that.
Oh, 100%.
Oh, which is just so much.
You know he is. You can almost just imagine they had, the rivalry or whatever they had going. It just kind of, it peaks up a little bit in Scripture.
I did a Bible study one time for a group of seasoned believers. Like, that's probably a good way to put that.
Sure.
In which and it'd be a really interesting sermon series. I went through the Gospel of John and captured every moment where John and Peter have interplay. And, oh, dude, John is brutal to this guy. Like, he just shows him up every time, always reveals all the stuff. And you can't, when you get to the end of it, you make whatever you want to out of it. But clearly there was a wonderful relationship between these guys, a brotherly connection. And so John has put so much humanity into his gospel that you can't even deny it. You wouldn't make it up. You wouldn't make it up, except that those two guys were connected in that way. There's no doubt that the early church had the strength that it had because those two vastly different people, one who was go, one who was love. Like, you had those two people going hand in hand, creating this whole movement of the church along with the other disciples. But they were the two prominent ones, and James, the brother of Jesus, was really a part of that as well. But anyways, that's a little extra that was there, but it's awesome.
You can always keep going. There's always that extra thing, but it makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I love the biggest thing to me is those words, the Greek words, and knowing that little extra study that is there if you can, take the time to dig it out.
Yeah.
And I just think back to, something I'd always heard, the agape love, God's love, perfect love. He loves, we try. And this is that.
Great Great point.
we just
Remind me of that next week.
we can't.
Yeah.
We do the best we can,
Yeah.
you know, and sometimes it's great. Sometimes, you know, we're really walking into the Spirit and leaning into God and letting His love that overflows in us be that, and that's that agape. But for us and for Peter, it's like, I mean, we'll try.
Yeah. And nobody ever tell me that Jesus doesn't show up while you're fishing. So go fishing.
That's your big takeaway.
My
Do
takeaway.
more fishing.
That's right. Do more fishing.
Uh-huh.
Less dudes, more fishing. I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. Totally kidding.
Yep. We know you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, man. I love it. Can't wait to see what comes out of it.
Me too.